Hello. I would like to welcome you to COVID-19 Pandemic and Clinical Data Management webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lillian, and I will be the operator for the event today. Please note, everyone dialed into the meeting will have an open mic, so please keep any background noise to a minimum and self-mute when you are not speaking. Your active participation in today's discussion is greatly appreciated. Be informed that this meeting is strictly confidential. Should you experience any technical difficulties with the web portion of today's program and need assistance, please notify us of your issue by utilizing the Q&A pod on the platform. Or you can call our technical support line by dialing 1-858-345-5913. The event today will last approximately 1 hour, and at this time, I would like to turn the microphone over to Arena.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the first COVID-19 webinar organized by SCDM. My name is Patrick Nalani, Chair of the SCDM Innovation Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you and moderate this webinar today. We believe this webinar will increase your awareness on important content about COVID-19 related regulatory guidance and help you tease out some of the similarities and differences across agencies. But before we dive into the many recommendations from regulatory agencies, let's frame this webinar within the wider SCDM framework to support our community to deal with the impact of COVID-19 to our clinical studies. So there will be a series of 3 webinars. Today's webinar will summarize COVID-19 regulatory updates from the US, EMA, UK, German, Indian, Japanese, and Chinese agencies. In 2 weeks, we will share examples of strategies implemented by multiple companies on how to handle the COVID-19 impact on clinical studies. So far, we have collected details from over a dozen companies. We specifically wanted to address the following 7 categories shown on the screen, which are going beyond clinical data management. Those are aligned with topics emerging from the guidance we will cover today. Last, we are in the process of planning a last webinar with industry experts to share deeper insights on how they address specifically emerging issues related to COVID-19. It will be a more open sessions with a lot of dialogue. In the meantime, you can go to the SCDM community website where we started to share some information. What you can find in there are 2 specific items. One is just an example on the screen of risk you need to mitigate when facing a COVID-19 impact related to impact on studies and participants, staff not being able to commute to work, or patients not being able to go to site, etc., as well as potential impact on your clinical studies. So go to the website, and we will be maintaining the website with additional useful information to you. So here is the list of the presenters today. So as housekeeping, so you should feel free to ask questions in the question chat box throughout the webinar. As it comes through your mind, we'll be addressing them at the end in the Q&A session. So let's now hand over to Tim, who will cover the FDA guidance. Up to you, Tim.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar today. My name is Tim Breen, and I'll be covering the U.S. FDA guidance on COVID-19. Here is the full title of the guidance. This was first released in March 2020 and updated April 2nd, 2020. The link to download this guidance is at the bottom of the slide. The guidance actually has 2 components. The first component are the topics that the FDA wanted to address. The second component is 10 question and answers. The SCDM COVID-19 task force has gone through a number of guidance, and we've come up with a list of impact topics, and that's the basis for this presentation and the other presentations. We encourage you to read the appropriate guidance, and we hope that these presentations help you navigate these guidance. As you can see, I have annotated each of the impact topics with the appropriate section or sections, the bullet or question that's relevant to that particular topic. Well, let's begin. The FDA guidance begins with 3 general considerations. They are the safety of clinical trial participants, compliance with good clinical practice, and clinical trial integrity. Safety of clinical trial participants is the primary concern of all clinical research professionals, whether during a health emergency or during normal times. Good clinical practice are the standards for all clinical research, and we must apply and maintain these standards during the COVID-19 pandemic. Clinical trial integrity ensures the validity of the clinical trial, and we must make sure that we minimize the risk to clinical trial integrity during this health emergency. While the FDA guidance covers many topics, it does not cover all the topics that we have identified. For example, clinical trial eligibility was not addressed in the FDA guidance. You'll see an example of a couple of these later in the presentation. Study participant continuation, discontinuation. This is a decision that will be part, I think, of all of our trials during the COVID-19 pandemic. The FDA has provided 4 factors when making this decision about study participant continuation, discontinuation. The nature of the investigational product, appropriate safety monitoring, investigational product supply chain, and the nature of the disease under study. This is not an exhaustive list of factors that are associated with this decision, and I'm sure there'll be others that you will encounter as you deal with this issue in clinical trials. The FDA recognizes that safety assessments may not be possible in the clinical setting. Therefore, they have provided some possible alternatives to in face-to-face safety assessments. Those could be phone contact, virtual visits, or alternate locations for collection of labs and completion of imaging. The safety assessments are the basis to answer the question whether to continue use or administration of the investigational product. We must have absolute confidence in our safety assessments in order to conduct our trials. So we must find methods to actually collect this safety data. Access to investigational product. If the investigational product is self-administered, then secure home delivery might be a method to actually provide investigational product to subjects. However, if we use secure home delivery, we must maintain investigational product accountability. On the other hand, if the investigational product is normally administered in a healthcare setting, an alternative might be home healthcare administration. The FDA suggests that you consult with the appropriate FDA review division before making this decision. And again, we must maintain investigational product accountability. These are areas where the clinical data manager will be integrally involved in making sure the appropriate data is collected. The FDA also recognizes that new or modified processes may need to be instituted. These processes must be consistent with the protocol, and we must document the reason for the change in process. And finally, we must indicate which study participants were impacted and how they were impacted. Protocol amendments. Changes to protocol due to immediate hazards may be implemented prior to IRB approval and FDA notification. This is so important. I'm going to repeat this. Changes to protocol due to immediate hazards may be implemented prior to IRB approval and FDA notification. However, IRB approval and FDA notification are required afterwards. Missing information and data. The FDA requires that we capture information in the CRF explaining the reason for missing information and data. Also, missing information and data must be summarized in the clinical study report. Changes in efficacy endpoint assessment. The FDA requires consultation with the appropriate review division regarding these types of changes. We also must document the reason for missing efficacy endpoint assessments. Protocol deviations. The FDA recommends that procedures to prioritize reporting of deviations be instituted. If protocol deviations related to COVID-19 are part of pre-specified analyses, then these pre-specified analyses must be documented in the statistical analysis plan. Study monitoring. The FDA suggests that we optimize the use of central and remote monitoring programs. Changes in data management and statistical analysis plans. The FDA suggests that you consider consultation with the applicable FDA review division if you're going to make these types of changes. And again, any protocol deviations used for pre-specified analyses need to be documented in the statistical analysis plan. With respect to COVID-19 screening, routine screening for COVID-19 does not require a protocol amendment. However, COVID-19 screening as part of research objectives does require a protocol amendment. With respect to informed consent process, the FDA acknowledges that there may be changes to informed consent policy and procedures. And also, at the end of this guidance, question 10 has a very nice discussion of informed consent from patients in isolation. Clinical study report or separate study specific document. One of these two must document the contingency measures implemented to manage study conduct disruption due to COVID-19. It also must contain a listing of all study participants affected by COVID-19 related study disruption. Finally, it has to document the analyses and corresponding discussions that address the impact of implemented contingency measures on safety and efficacy results. As with patient eligibility, patient privacy, and restart of clinical trials after suspension, were not addressed in the FDA guidance. I have listed a description of the 10 questions and answers in the end of this guidance for your convenience, and I have also noted which of these questions I thought were most relevant to clinical data management. With that, I will end the discussion of the FDA guidance and pass it on to Peter Stockman, who will deal with the EMA guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Moving to the next slide. My name is Peter Stockman. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to summarize the European guidance documents. Basically, we have two guidance documents which I will be addressing points to consider and the guidance to sponsors. And okay, we're back to the first slide. That's great. And I guess very similar to what Tim has been describing, there are a couple of key themes here, patient safety and well-being being the first and foremost relevant aspect. The sponsors are told to be mindful of the burden on the sites at this time, so not to ask too much attention. And the third key theme basically is the impact of the measures that are taken with respect to COVID-19 on the scientific validity of the studies, like lockdown and social distancing, may lead to gaps in data collection, in protocol deviations, and may lead to issues in the availability of medication. And that's basically what they are addressing here. The first guidance document I would like to discuss is the points to consider document, which focuses on the methodological aspects to limit the interference of COVID-19 related measures on ongoing trials. And this document was issued on the 25th of March by the Biostatistics Working Party. And it basically says that we have to pre-plan how we can capture systemic deviations. I mean, we have to collect and we have to analyze our data with two things in mind: exposed versus non-exposed. And there was a little bit of a kind of a discussion ongoing what that means. In a virus context, it suggests exposed to a virus, but if you read more carefully, it suggests that this is referring to subjects that were exposed to measures, so subjects that entered the study or were part of the study prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. So exposed means exposed to measures. But I also know that this is open for public consultation now, that some companies ask questions for clarification what exactly is meant by exposed, and subjects that are infected and non-infected. We have to do a risk assessment on the potential impact of COVID-19 directly on the trial participants and the COVID-related measures that may be affecting our trial conduct and the conclusivity of our trial. And we have to develop a well-documented analysis to evaluate the implications of the measures. So basically all kinds of biases we may be introducing by the measures that are implemented. They want us to have an analysis done by an independent data monitoring committee on the aggregated and blind data to assess if the trial is still delivering the data we anticipated it to deliver. And what they are envisioning is that based on the advice of the DMC, we may restart at additional subjects or come up with any other measures and analyses to deal with any biases that were introduced. And they encourage to have a discussion with the competent authorities. The second guidance document was issued 2 days later. The second version of that document was issued 2 days later. And yesterday I discovered that the day before yesterday they updated this document to version 3, but I wasn't able to find the time to update what I'm showing here. But I will indicate where you will find more detailed information, perhaps sometimes a little bit different information in the third version of this document. Basically, this document is also intended to cope with the challenges related to the completion of assessments and visits and the provision of medication. And this guidance was issued by the Clinical Trials Expert Group, by the Clinical Trials Facilitation and Coordination Group, and the GCP Inspectors Working Group, all as part of the European Medicines Agency, EMA. And they start by telling us that we really have to critically assess starting any new trials or including new subjects in ongoing trials. And they can imagine that for ongoing trials, a risk assessment has to be done, and that we have to assess the appropriateness of of all kinds of changes, conversion of physical to virtual visits because of, the lockdown and the social distancing aspect and the fact that sites may be, very busy with other things, postponing or canceling visits, temporarily halt trials on a whole or hold specific sites, suspension or slowing down of recruitment, extension of duration, postponing trials, or postponing the activation of sites that were not activated yet. So they ask us to come up with a risk assessment of possible measures. And of course, all these changes should be proportionate and taking into account the interests of the sites that are very busy, and of course, safety and well-being of the subjects. And they stress that prospective protocol waivers, so come up with all kinds of ideas, and implementing it before IRB approval will remain unacceptable. That's typically one of these issues that you will find in FDA warning letters. And of course, compliance with protocol should be maintained so that we can still understand and interpret the results, what we have been doing. Safety reporting, in spite of the fact that the world changed to a large extent, investigators should continue to collect AEs through alternative means, phone calls, video meetings, that kind of stuff. And again, they stress that the sponsors should do an ongoing risk assessment on the trial subjects with respect to the measures that are implemented. And since the measures may be escalating, they really expect us to do an assessment and a reassessment, an ongoing assessment. And the whole risk approach is something they refer to the revision 2 of ICA GCP E6, the risk-based quality management, as you may recall, Chapter 5 in GCP. With respect to communication, they indicate that absolute priority is given to any protocols or any interaction on development of medication for the treatment of COVID. And they also, of course, want to be informed whenever things change in ongoing studies, if the changes are likely to affect safety, well-being of the participants or the scientific value of the trial, when the trial is put on hold, and if anything had to happen with the subjects to protect them against immediate hazard. But then, of course, you can do it. It can be done, but yeah, they have to be informed retrospectively, exactly as Tim just described. So basically, the substantial amendments. Then, if I go to the next slide, changes to trial conduct, of course, should be agreed with and communicated to the sites and via the sites with the subjects. And with respect to informed consent, it needs to remain compliant with the trial protocol and national rules, and we have to consider the pertinence of adding new subjects in ongoing clinical trials, of course. And again, absolute priority is given to clinical trials for the prevention or treatment of COVID-19. And we should look at alternative procedures to obtain informed consent. And for any trials involving COVID-19 with patients who may be too sick to give written consent, this guidance document gives procedures to have alternative ways to get informed consent. And for new changes to protocols, urgent changes in trials may necessitate reconsent, and again, alternative ways to get these reconsents should be considered. With respect to investigational medicinal products, so IMP, but also in vitro diagnostics and medical devices, they advise to look at alternative shipping and storage ways because of disruption of the infrastructure. But of course, medication has to be supplied. So they give examples. Make sure there are larger amounts of trial medication provided to the participants. Make sure there is appropriate stock available in case the truck does not arrive in time. be prepared to redistribute from one site to the other, and as Tim also referred to already, situation of delivering IMP directly to the trial participants, which is allowed in a few member states. The initial version of this guidance document was kind of restrictive, but in the version 3, more conditions are specified that give information on how to handle these alternative ways to ship IMP. Okay, and then the last slide from my side is focusing on changes to monitoring. Of course, also the CRAs cannot travel, and the sites may be too preoccupied. So also here they are advising to cancel or postpone on-site monitoring visits, implement alternative ways, phone, video, etc. Again, adapt the on-site monitoring plan, so skip on-site monitoring, but focus more on centralized monitoring and central review of data. And, of course, remote site selection and investigator training can all be done in a remote way. All the ways we deviate, we change, are supposed to be reported in the monitoring report and eventually in the clinical study report. And they want us to plan for, robust follow-up measures. Once the situation normalized, we have to kind of fix and explain whatever happened during this kind of contingency situation. The initial version of this guidance document said that remote source data verification is not really applicable in most member states. So give the sponsor access to source data, or give access to de-identified PDFs. But in version 3 of this document, this is nuanced a little bit further, and it's even indicated that in some cases remote SDV is the only way forward. So there's a change or a progression there. Audits should in general be avoided or postponed. Protocol deviations, they understand that protocol deviations under these circumstances are kind of unavoidable, and they indicate that they will take a proportionate approach, particularly when the best interest of the study subjects is kept in mind. And lastly, again, they stress that the submission of large multinational trials to develop COVID treatment has utmost priority. And if a sponsor comes up with a proposal, they can apply for an accelerated, voluntary, harmonized procedure and a full fee waiver and a fast-track procedure for scientific advice. And with this, I want to hand over to Joanna, who will address MHRA and BfArM guidance in conjunction with the EMA guidance documents. Joanna.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, my name is Joanna Fröck-Marwitz, and I have the pleasure to talk about the analysis of the regulatory guidelines on COVID-19 studies for 2 European countries, UK and Germany. And as we have seen, presented by Peter, the overall level of the EMA on the country. Now we are moving on from the EMA level to the country level, and this is also one of the aims of this webinar. So moving on to the MHRA, the first guidance on the coronavirus for studies conducted in UK has been published on 19th of March. And since then, it has been updated on 22nd of April. And here you can see the full title and also the link to this MHRA guidance. Secondly, the BfArM, the German Federal Institute of Drug and Medical Devices, there is no guidance itself. There is an article which has been published on 30th of March, and on the same day, BfArM published 2 versions, version 2.0 and 2.1, And since then, it was another version 2.2 published on 7th of April, and also very recently there was a change to this, and on 28th of April the version 2.3 has been published, and it's only 2 days ago. It's not on the slide. Secondly, there is a supplementary recommendations document for to the EMA guidance, and this one was published on 26th of March, and currently this is the only version we have. So as there is no global response to the COVID-19 disruptions, on the clinical trials, there are still a few common themes, and one of those common themes is the patient safety. This is being repeated on every second of every guidance until now we have reviewed, and there will be different disruptions on this. So there are immediate impacts on the patient safety, while the study continues, and there are also some long-term aspects, and those will become visible step by step. And also, while the questions are being addressed with the authorities, also with the M8RA and BfArM, they are being answered step by step as well. So both authorities have provided, the answers and the ways how to support the timely safety reporting. And this begins with the possibility to directly call the PI, for example, and report on adverse event or SAE. And also some, the on-site visit can be converted to the telemedical visit. So everything which can be done should be done, and many additional ways are being now acceptable for the authorities to everything. It's to be compliant with the timelines to report and to confirm that the patient well-being. For the M8RA, they have made available also a dedicated email address, and this can be used or should be used to accelerate the process of notifications. If there are any changes to safety reporting, any delays, any changes in the process, this email address can be used to present them or to address them with the M8RA, and the authority will give them obviously priority if there is a subject line on the COVID-19. For the BfArM, the necessity to notify the variation of changes of safety reporting has not changed. So it's still also for example, if a visit becomes a telephone visit, BfArM needs to be notified. So mainly the takeaway from here, in terms of patient safety, the M8RA is mostly aligned with the EMA guidance. Moving on to the second aspect or second common theme on the, comparing the guidance across the countries, across the regions, there is access to the investigational product. And as you have also seen on slides presented by Peter and Tim, there are novel ways, has become acceptable as of the regulatory guidelines, and there currently across all guidelines we can see that there is allowed to deliver the IMP to patient home, as we also can see this, the decision on this, on how, or the fact that this is now being accepted by the authorities is only the beginning of a long list of questions. So basically, those questions are also being step by step addressed by the authorities, And some of them are already very well explained. For example, that the patients need to consent to the changed way of access to the IMP. And additionally, the MHRA and the BFARM require both to follow up with the patient in a specific way. So they need to call the patient, for example, to confirm the safe delivery, and also they need to describe quite specifically, how this is. The guidance, the adequate medical supervision is being provided by the PI, because it's still the requirement. The patient should not be left on his own or her own. Moving on to the topics addressed, or the common themes between the MHRA and the EMA, there is as I already mentioned, there is a significant degree of alignment between those two guidance. For example, the restart or the halt of the clinical trial is something where MHRA is not asking to be informed. For example, there is only the need to document it very well and explaining the reason and notify and put it in the TMF of the study. Also, the study monitoring, there is a visible reduction on on-site monitoring, also acceptable. Same regards the protocol deviations, where we observe the increase in protocol deviations across the countries and across the regions, and this is something we just need to take to the account and document very well. What MHRA has specified in the guidance, and emphasized is that in terms of protocol amendments, there should be not, there is no allowance by the authority to bypass the patient accessibility, and making specific changes to the protocol and with the protocol amendment is absolutely not acceptable. Moving on to BFARM. The article has 5 points, and those points are mostly also aligned and addressing the same topics as the EMA. What is really different and explained into very detail in the supplementary recommendations to the EMA guidance is the focus on the patient privacy. So we have a very rigid regulations as of the GDPR in Germany. It's the DSGVO, and very important for this is if we are going to change on the studies or use the communication technology for example for remote monitoring, there is this communication technology needs to meet the requirements of the GDPR. And there are restrictions in use of the video camera, for example, for remote monitoring, and finally the use of cloud solutions is not acceptable at all. And so this was the analysis of the comparison between the EMA and MHRA and BFARM. And now we are moving to India, and I would like to hand over to Ashish.
Thank you, Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you for this webinar. My name is Ashish Bagre, and I will be presenting a notice from the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, India, about the COVID-19 effect on the conduct of clinical trial situation due to outbreak of COVID-19, which was released on the 30 March 2020. So CDSU understand that various challenges may arise during this conduct of clinical trial, in the wake of outbreak of COVID-19 in the country, and this may lead to difficult to maintain a complete adherence to the approved protocol, regulatory provision and procedures, and also applicable guidelines. And this may also lead to the various activities such as the recruitment of trial subjects, laboratory testing, diagnosis, administration of the IP, reporting of SAEs, schedule visit, assessment of safety and efficacy parameters, etc. And next point is the impact of clinical trial about the patient safety. It may depend upon the nature of the trial, disease condition, locality, region where the trial is located, and government restriction. Yeah. And in the next point, CDSU understand the safety, well-being of the trial subject is of paramount importance, and they emphasize that for the ongoing trial, sponsor in coordinates with investigator and ethics committee should decide to continue the trial or not. And in some cases, there may be possibility to move for the protocol amendment, deviation, modification in the procedure. There is a possibility. And also, sponsors should assess the impact and take the appropriate decision. If required, along with the investigator and the ethics committee to ensure the right safety and well-being of the trial subject, as well as the integrity of the clinical data, and maintain the complete record of the same, including the reason for such amendment and deviation, so that it can be produced later if required. So in this review of the present situation, the communication between the sponsor, investigator, and ethics committee for any kind of amendment, deviation, or modification can be done through the electronic mode or email. And they have also suggested that if there is any communication required to the CDSU, they can submit to the CDSU in this mentioned email ID, dci@nic.in, and also copy to the headquarters CDSU. And this is the link where you can find more detail about the more update on the COVID-19 effect on the conduct of clinical trials. So just to let you know that this is just a notice. Unlike FDA and other agencies, they have released a very detailed guideline. So however, they have tried to cover most of the aspect in the conduct of clinical trial. If you wish to visit or see more details, you can visit to this mentioned email link and see the details. So that's all from the CDSU point of view. I am handing over to the next presenter.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. My name is Yasaru Shibata, so I will explain Japanese regulatory guidance on the COVID-19 on behalf of SCDM Japan Steering Committee. There are three announcements from the PMDA so far. The first one is released March 31st. The second one is April 10th. The last one is a Q&A. This is 3 times devices. The latest one is the 23rd of April. These two documents, the first and second document is released in English, but the third one is the Q&A is only Japanese. So SCDM Japan Steering Committee translated to the English. I attach the Q&A part in the backup of this slide deck. That's the status in the COVID-19 in Japan. That so far, the 14,000 cases are reported, and unfortunately, about 400 deaths are reported in Japan. As the Japanese government required a state of the emergency all over the Japan, it will until May 6, but it will continue furthermore. No lockdown for the cities, only stay at home request, not an order, no punishment for violators. So schools are closed until May 6. Probably it will continue further. Food shop, pharmacy, and other essential shops and services are opened. Olympic Games are postponed to the next year. Almost Japanese sites are opened and conducting the clinical trials in these difficult situations. Okay, the first is a PMDA. The first announcement is a PMDA pledge to tackle COVID-19 pandemic. This announcement is released on the March 31st. This document is released by the Fujiwara Yasuhiro. He is the chief executive of the PMDA. PMDA facilitates the development of the medical product for the COVID-19. The main content of the announcement is the first, the first interaction is sponsored. The second, clinical trials start without waiting for 30 days. So Japanese regulation sponsors must wait for 30 days for the review by the PMDA. But in the COVID-19 cases, so we can start the clinical trial, don't have to wait 30 days. The detailed information, I skipped this text. The second document is a PMDA tasks further steps to speed up clinical development of the COVID-19 product. So this document is released on the April 10th. The same person is the head of the PMDA. The main announcement is the first is a Q&A on how to manage clinical trials during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll explain the Q&A, the content later. Number 2, IRB meetings may be held in the exceptional way. Number 3, PMDA participated a virtual meeting held under the umbrella of the ICMRA to discuss regulatory considerations related to the development of the SARS-CoV-2, the vaccine candidate and treatment. Okay, this is a detailed information. I skip this text. So this is a Q&A. Third document is a Q&A regarding the clinical trials, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and regenerative medicine products under the influence of the COVID-19. The latest update is April 21st. It includes 8 Q&As. General statement. In the ongoing clinical trials or the pharmaceutical medical devices, regenerative medicine products, etc. So it's focused on the make sure the priority is the patient safety, then keep a record of the circumstances, the correspondings, and be able to explain its validity. So this document is important thing is we have to keep a record for these circumstances in such of the protocol deviation, and sometimes the patient IM investigator product delivered to the patient home, etc. All medical institutions consult and discuss with the sponsors first regarding any concerns at medical institutions. So this is a title and category of the 8 Q&As. The question 1 is the delivery of investigator product to the patient homes. Question 2, IRB in this difficult situation. Question 3 is the monitoring. If monitoring cannot conduct as per plan, how to manage the monitoring. Question 4 is the product protocol deviations. Question 5, investigator product. And question 6 is test and evaluation. Question 7 is other administration of IPs and evaluations. question 8, visiting the subject home by nurse. And these Q&A are including this slide deck as a backup. If you have any interest, please use the English translation version as for your reference. Thank you. That is for me. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now we move to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Zhang. It's my pleasure to have this chance to introduce the clinical operation challenges during COVID-19 pandemic in China. And just today, later today in China daytime, NMPA released a draft guidance for clinical trial conduct on during COVID-19 pandemic. Is a draft version for the industry comment. So it's just released today, and there will be, collecting comments. And then it's going to be finalized. So because it's very short time for me, I cannot prepare the PPT to enter the content for that guidance. I'll put that in the next webinar. So for this time of webinar, I will introduce overall situation what we went through in China in the past several months, especially starting from February of this year. But for the last 1 month up to now, things are getting more and more normal. Go back to the routine clinical trial operation. So my first slide is the overall situation related to the trial operation. So I actually, summarized 4 major points here. First one is, of course, the hospitals stopped a lot of activities, including the clinical trial visits. So many hospitals is not allowed for any, subject for clinical trial to come into the hospital because of the pandemic. And then many doctors also went to support COVID-19 patient treatment. They are not available for clinical trial conduct. Also, transportation is limited or even stopped during a lot of locations in cities. So that impacts a lot for the clinical trial conduction. And quarantine policy restricted people travel and visit. That both impact the subjects and also the clinical trial, study teams. So my next slide is talking about the impact study subjects. So because the investigator side are closed, and if not closed, it's not like open at normal, frequency. So the study subject, they cannot go to the investigator side in time for the routine visit. So that obviously result in a lot of, missing data and the protocol division. And there are also the difficulty for the transportation of the study drug, that has, the both end of problem. So because the transportation problem and the study drug cannot be shipped normally in time as required, and because the site visit is not allowed and the site is not open, and the study drug cannot be shipped there also. So that is a big challenge, and the reason for the protocol division as well. The local laboratory testing at site cannot be performed normally, also because of the reason I just mentioned. And patients some of the studies, the company is trying to find the nearby laboratories for the patients to perform the tests, and some of the patients' locations don't have nearby labs, so that results to a lot of missing laboratory data, and imaging data cannot be collected. Also, because especially for the oncology study, the tumor assessment, that is the one of the main primary data for efficacy evaluation impacted a lot. And also the CRAs have difficulties to reach to the study patients, and because of the isolation and quarantine, and also the access limitation from they are not allowed to access to go near to the area where the subjects live in. So it's is quite difficult. So next slide, I'm summarize the major points impact to the trial operation. So obviously the recruitment slowed down for almost every trial, right? And especially for new trial start, the new recruitment is very hard, and it's almost stopped for some of the trials. And operation team cannot go to the site for monitoring CRAs and the CRCs. They cannot go into the hospital for the site monitoring. The SDV cannot be done. EDC entry, of course, stopped or seriously delayed, and they cannot answer queries, and no shipment out. The sample collected at site cannot be shipped out in time, and also the well-trained trial staff for that trial can be absent just because of either because of the isolation or because of the sometimes they may not feel good. Also, they might feel sick or something. They can have to take care of themselves. So a lot of trials will have challenges to arrange new staff to the trial, so that will cause training concerns. Then the lack of resource also result from that this similar reason, and then many companies are trying to find workaround to collect trial information, especially for the critical data points, the primary data and study endpoints, and safety data. They do all their best to collect that. For example, if they cannot collect that at site, they have maybe had phone calls or remote, video, all kind of ways trying to get the data, or the test can be performed. Somebody can go to the place near the patient to do the test, and all kind of way trying to collect the data as much as possible, not to lose it. Then the last slide I write here is the impact related to the data collection. So, from the previous points I just mentioned, if they were all directly linked to data, of course the missing data increased a lot. So the majority part of the concern is coming from the safety data and the primary critical data. So a lot of companies focus a lot, did a lot of effort to try to capture back those data and have workaround approaches to catch those data in. So data entry cannot be performed in time. And of course, the data validation cannot be done in time also. And then there are a lot of increased data error due to the lack of site monitoring, and the SDV cannot be done, and the database log was really impacted because of this data cleaning issue, and the routine stuff can have problem, goes to the study to work on the study, and then the new person backup person will have training issue. So that all increase the data errors. The local lab testing involved more data source, not from the previous defined investigator side. So that actually caused problem as for the CRF, we enter the data. That data is supposed to be collected at site, but now it's collected via phone or video. Well, the study team going to see whether this going to be, the similar quality for the data can be used for statistical analysis. There will be concern raised from that perspective as well. And the central lab data missing increased a lot due to the sample collection, delayed, or the shipment cannot be shipped out because of the transportation problem. And then new data, the data type. By data type, I mean the new way to capture the data has increased a lot. That is a result of from the data collection workaround approach. Then the existing CRF design cannot properly capture all data collected. For example, if the current CRF design is collect data all on-site visit, and the investigator can talk directly to the patient and collect the data, that's the quality is not the same like this, like people just call your phone to ask the same data from the patient. So how CRF can capture both of the data and don't mix them together, because when we wanted to analyze them, they might be different from statistical analysis perspective. But from this perspective, CRF design needs to be changed as well also. So for all those kind of data collection, we have to, the study team align to GCP, make sure the protocol amendment before the data, the collection and the CRF design amendment. So that is all done by the clinical team, but it's very challenging. So just in summary, in the past, several months, China industry went through a very challenging time, but the study team had a lot of thoughts, try to manage the data loss and talk to agency and the EC as much as possible. So it's well handled, and a lot of remove data access and new electronic data platform used for the remote monitoring. It's what a lot of new approaches are done for the during the entire process. So that's all I wanted to share with everybody for my session this time. Thank you, Peter, for helping me.
Very welcome, Carrie. Thank you very much.
So, thanks to all the speakers. So it's time to wrap up the presentation section and slowly to move into the Q&A. But before we go into the Q&A, let's wrap up. So as you have noticed from all the accents on the call, so it's a global pandemic and all regulatory agencies are reacting to it. Today, we only covered regulations from 7 agencies, but I know there is more than that. Many countries in Europe and a location in Asia Pacific have issued guidance. So we covered today the main agencies. So hopefully it gave you a good flavor of what's happening. You can see in that summary, we organized what is covered by all the agencies by topics. The one highlighted in yellow and in bold seems to be the most prevalent topics covered by agencies. So first and foremost, all of them are covering safety and well-being of the patients. And you can see that every single agency is covering safety and well-being of the patients. What is very interesting as well is every single agency we cover today have provision in how to interact with them. So they expect sponsors and people participating in the conduct of clinical trials to interact with agencies. They are very open, they are very flexible, and they can accommodate a lot of things. I can give you one example that happened in my organization. We needed to have one inspection, and that inspection was done remote, over the phone, where in the past that agency would have come to our facility to do the inspection. So they're open, they're supportive, so they're really asking all of us to engage in discussion with them. What is clear as well on the prevalent topics is safety assessments, IP, provision from investigational products, protocol deviations, and safety monitoring. They are all expecting on-site monitoring to decrease quite a bit. Some of the presenters mentioned that SDV may not be possible at all. And actually, some of the European countries do not authorize remote source data verification. They do not authorize source data to be seen outside of the site, even accessing EMR. So some studies could not have SDV being complete, so they're pushing for more SDR, source data review, on remote and centralized data reviews. So today we are really focused on regulations, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, we'll have a webinar in 2 weeks covering what companies are specifically doing to address those regulations. So we'll move slowly to the Q&A, so you can start posting questions. We really want to focus on questions related to regulation, what's covered, what's covered, and what the regulations are suggesting. So let's move to the Q&A now, and thanks to all of you. With the first question, I will open with that one. It's what are the risks involved with sending an investigational product to the patient's home. So while agents, so I will probably use the Q&A mentioned into the FDA guidance. So the FDA guidance, as one example, provides example and provision to what to consider in the context of IP provisioning to patients. But what they clearly state is first, so it's sending IPs on self-administered IP should not introduce any further risk to the patients or to the clinical study. The storage conditions needs to be maintained. And even if you ship the drug to the patients, temperature monitoring, storage, all of that needs to be maintained. And you need to, as mentioned by the presenter, you need to maintain drug accountability. When it comes to sending drugs to patients, you could be exposed to privacy. So now you know the address of the patient. So who is involved in the shipment of the IP to the patients will need the right safety firewalls with that. Your IVR system may or may not be set up to do so. So I think there's a lot of risk associated with the shipment, but first and foremost, you need to consider the safety risk. Okay, so I'm going through the questions. Okay, there's a lot of questions actually about telehealth on remote visits on SDV. So, as mentioned, so SDV is becoming an issue. Monitor cannot go to the sites. That's not possible. So in a lot of cases, SDV cannot happen. And as I mentioned, in some of the European countries, you cannot give access to source data outside of remotely from the sites. It cannot be done. So no matter what you do, it will have to be documented most likely into your monitoring visit report on what you do if you reduce source data verifications. On some of the guidance from the regulator suggests you can potentially reduce SDV, but no matter what, you have to document any change in the SDV into your monitoring plan. I don't know if any other presenter want to add any insight on SDV in other regions. Anyone? I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you, but I cannot not add nothing to that.
Okay. So let's look at. I'm trying to read all the questions. No. Expectation. Is there any regulatory expectation that sponsor should be correct? I think, and maybe, Tim, you covered that one. There's one question about, is there any regulatory expectation that sponsors should be recording COVID testing external to the trial? I believe no, right? Yeah. Tim? I think I cannot hear you. You might be on mute.
We cannot hear you.
The FDA did not speak to any requirement for COVID-19 testing or screening. They just basically stated that if it's routine, then you don't need a protocol. If it's part of research data, then you will need or not a protocol, but an amendment. And if it's part of the research data, then you will need an amendment. So there's no absolute requirement for screening.
I know EMA suggests that they do refer to any unplanned local safety test, and they which I think this could be referring to, and they would like to include that in that as part of the risk assessment. So I think the expectation is that will be included somewhere.
Yeah.
It's explicitly mentioned in the EMA guidance document 3.3, so there may be more information there.
Thanks, Tim. So one question is more, to be honest, we'll be covering in more details the what to do in the next webinar. We can still answer some of the questions. One question came about what to document in your data management plan regarding COVID-19, and if you should have specific languages or text related to COVID-19. So what it is clear from all the regulation, and I will ask presenters to weigh in, is no matter what's happening, we are expecting impact to the overall processes by COVID-19. So there will be an impact to the monitoring, to the sites. Everything that is impacting processes needs to be documented. So it means that everything impacting data management practices, so maybe you will increase the scope of your centralized data review or remote monitoring. Maybe you might consider updating your edit checks to detect protocol deviations related to COVID-19. We all know we would expect more missed visits, missed procedures. So you might need to take actions. All those actions will have to be documented into your data management plan no matter what. And I think in the context of COVID-19, I would expect it would be a good advice for any study impacted or run during the COVID-19 outbreak to have a minimum explanation of what you have done within data management in your data management plan. And that goes to the same with your monitoring plan, your safety monitoring plan, etc. I don't know what else you want, if anybody wants to weigh in as well. I was seeing you nodding, Peter.
Yeah, I think that's. Go ahead, Tim.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say that I think that the surfaces from all these guidance documents, that is really, really crucial to document what you're doing and the why of things and the reasoning behind it. And also in the risk-based approach, really try to assess why you're doing it, what risks you are envisioning and how you plan to deal with these risks. I think that is really important.
Any changes to your processes or procedures need to be documented.
Yeah, absolutely. So we still think we're getting a lot of questions about EDC and SDV in general. And I think one size does not. So what I want to make clear is one size does not fit all. Everything depends on the design of your clinical study, the criticality of your endpoints. So I think already ICH E6 revision 2 was pushing for a lot of for all of the sponsors and study participants to move to a more risk-based approach that is heavily emphasized in the current context. So you need to consider a good risk-based approach. You know you cannot do SDV of everything. So when you can finally resurrect or restart SDV, you might want to limit your SDV to only critical items. We have to be acknowledging that all sites have been impacted heavily by COVID-19. Most of them have regular practices. They had to treat patients with COVID-19. They have been potentially closed for a little while in some cases. So there's some expectation that we should not unnecessarily burden sites when we resume activities. So I think one advice is to focus on what matters. It may mean that depending on how you set up your EDC, you have to maybe do an EDC update to uncheck SDV required as an example. For some of the data items, you will not expect to SDV anymore. Some systems, like the major player, like in Oracle Inform or Medidata Rave, have risk-based SDV or targeted SDV functionalities. You might want to consider them and use them. So when it comes to potentially missing visit, you might want to add flags in your EDC system to flag if a visit is missed due to COVID-19 or if a procedure is missed to COVID-19. It is very likely that you will have to update your EDC to simplify the life of the site. So one of the recommendations is to work with your study team based on the design of your protocol to assess what to do based on your visit schedules and so on. There's not too many questions coming, so feel free to send more questions. If any of the presenters want to expand on some of the topics we covered before. Okay, we covered EDC. Patient. No, I think that, I'm not sure I can answer that one, to be honest with you. One question is about, can ethnicity of the patients play a role in developing the protocol? I think it's not really purely related to the COVID-19 situation. It's more in the context of the, maybe if there is any ethnicity-related drug effects, but it is not really related to COVID-19. We are not seeing any more questions, so coming our way. Okay. Yes. One question is from Valerie. Are many companies amending CRF to capture missing visits? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we have reached out to a dozen of companies to collect feedback on what they are doing. The feedback is suggesting that many companies are capturing missed visits multiple ways. It does not necessarily require a CRF change, but it is captured in the eCRF. Some companies are just adding a comment. If you have a missed visit, they would add a comment into the visit, just like that. Some companies will add a reason for missed visit and add a code list for reasons for missing the visit. So there is not one size fits all, but everybody is adding a CRF completion instructions for the site on how to document a missed visit and missed procedure, being either a comment or being a code list into your eCRF. But I can tell you that all the companies that we have contacted all have implemented measures to capture visits related to COVID-19. And actually, it's probably one important element for data managers and for clinical teams in general. As mentioned by all of the presenters, there is a huge focus on protocol deviations. We expect a surge or increase of missed visits and missed procedures. And we're going to have to document in the clinical study report protocol deviations resulting from COVID-19 or any impact of COVID-19 to to the study conduct. So it is fair to say that for any system capturing data, we need to find a way to tease out what data is being impacted by COVID-19 directly or indirectly. So it is expected that the CRF should be amended or CRF instruction being changed to cater for that.
So in the FDA guidance, missing visits are covered under the missing information data section. So and you have to explain the reason for the missing visit on the CRF, according to the FDA.
Yeah, no, thank you. We get questions about the nature of the trial. I'm not sure if there's no context. Could you clarify if you are online, maybe clarifying your questions, typing what do you mean by nature of the trial? But it is true that
it relates to the previous question, or the question one further up by the same person.
Okay, sorry, so let me open that one. Impact of the
I think go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tim.
I think from the FDA's point of view, the nature of the trial would be, is it a oncology trial? Is it, a GI trial or some other type of trial? And that makes, I think, some difference. For example, many of the oncology trials require infusion of chemotherapy or immunotherapy. So that's a big difference in trying to ensure that treatment gets administered with respect to other types of trials. So it does change across the nature of the trial.
No, definitely, Tim. That's very important. All agencies are mentioning that you need to conduct a risk assessment of the potential risk of the COVID-19 situation to your clinical trials. So you're right, the nature of the trial will impact how you react. So for example, we talked about the IP sent to the patients, but if the IP is an injection, you will likely not send a syringe to be self-injected by the patients, right? You might need to consider having either no injections or sending a nurse to the patient home. So the nature of your treatment, the nature of your assessment. So for example, if you have telehealth visit, and if you're just doing a safety visit to collect pulse of basic feedback from patients, you may be able to do some with devices on telehealth visit. If you're talking about more than physical exam, if you need to do an MRI or an X-ray, you can't really do that through telehealth visit, right? You need either to ask the patients to go to a local facility and authorize that, but through a protocol amendment. So there is not one size fits all. It really depends on what procedures are being required by your protocol. It depends on the drug being studied, the therapeutic area. So there's a lot of factors to consider when changing your process, your ECRF, and assessing the impact of COVID-19 on your clinical study. So, good question, Devarajan. Yeah. Let's see what other questions we have. So for safety,
Is there a question about long-term follow-up?
Second, I think there's one question about for studies that are long-term, and that will be lasting for years. So studies that have been, how do you suggest updating the DMP CRF as COVID may not be affecting data in 1, 2 to 3 years? So I think you're right. If you have a clinical study and you expect a database lock, let's say in 2021, 2022, hopefully we would have COVID-19 resolved by then. So that's fair. But no matter what, I think the expectation has been set that when you write your CSR in a couple of years from now, you will still have to explain the potential impact of COVID-19 to your clinical studies. So I think it's where the risk assessment comes. So and you need to find the appropriate measure. So if you expect your study to continue for a long time, you don't want to potentially make dramatic changes to your ECRF if it's not required. So you should only probably focus on the must-have. You must identify protocol deviations related to COVID-19. You must ensure safety of your patients during the COVID-19 crisis. So I'm assuming that in that context, you need to discuss with the study team on what is absolutely necessary to maintain safety and well-being and protocol adherence in the time of COVID-19, but you might not want to include some minor nice to have in your ECRF or in your data management plan if it's not necessary. You might have easier way to do that. So I think, again, it's not one size fits all. You need to have a pragmatic approach to it and focus on what matters. No, good question, Lauren.
I agree.
I mean, actually, you might be trying to talk and we don't hear you.
Yeah. You may be muted.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we have 5 minutes to go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So I was saying it is also important that to capture this point, if your study is very having a long term and the visit is having into the either it is a short or long. So it depends upon the visit of the subject. If it is not affecting the subject visit, so I think it is not really required to change any DMP or CRF. But however, you can capture if any procedure or anything is missed, so that you can do the documentation.
Yes. Okay. Good. I think. So
I think I might have deleted a question from Denise Redcar Brown. If she can rewrite that, I apologize.
Yes, I'll go ahead and retrieve that right now.
Okay, thank you.
I know we have like 4 minutes. Now we have 4 minutes. We have 4 minutes before we wrap up, and maybe is one interesting question, and maybe we can close on that one potentially. Is one question from Ajit: is IP home delivery is only applicable to COVID-19 trial or for other trials? So, few things I can say on that is there is a lot of changes in the industry anyway. And we are all moving toward more complex and decentralized clinical trials. Our clinical studies are becoming more patient-centric. And I think it is not prohibited per regulation to ship drugs to patients. And I think everything has to be documented in your protocol, and everything depends on the drug you're using anyway. So I think it is likely that a lot of what we're doing in the COVID-19 is applicable in the context of traditional clinical studies. And I think it was not done previously at a large scale because we have been probably more conservative in our approaches within sponsors. But I would expect that moving forward, as we have been pressed to change our processes and practices to COVID-19, a lot of what we're implementing in the context of COVID-19 might continue on. And I don't know if everybody would agree or disagree with that statement on the call. Looks like everybody agrees. So maybe if you can have the last slide. Could you switch to slide? Okay, no, so I'll move to the next slide. So first of all, thank you all for attending this COVID-19 webinar from SCDM. I hope you found it informative and interesting. So we'll have in 2 weeks a webinar specifically focusing on feedback from companies on how they have dealt with COVID-19. They will share example of what they have done, not only on the ECI, but on monitoring, on many aspects, including safety, on protocol deviation, etc. So come to the next meeting or webinar in 2 weeks. So I thank you all. I wish you a nice rest of your day and be safe and be well. Thank you all.